Hey everyone, welcome back to the Paste Studios. We are now live with Tom Morello. Tom, thanks for taking the time to do this, man. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Yeah, especially on show day. And you got to run out of here and get over to Barclays
That's
for
correct,
the Title by Brooklyn show tonight. So thank you very much for doing it. And so we're going to get into a segment from Wayne Kramer from the MC5's biography that he just put out. It's called The Hard Stuff, and you and Wayne, you guys cross paths a number of times, and so this segment is about Jail Guitar Doors, which is an organization that you guys have worked together on in order to bring musical instruments, musical education into prisons across the U.S.
That's right.
And Billy Bragg was the one that started the organization in the UK, and then Wayne brought it over here, and so we'd love to hear a couple words about it and the segment itself.
Sure, fantastic. This is Wayne's book, from Wayne's book, The Hard Stuff. Brother Wayne Kramer writes in chapter 37, Jail Guitar Doors. As we rode up from Manhattan to the picturesque town of Ossining, I remember that Sing Sing was the prison that movie gangsters in the 30s and 40s referred to as up the river, as in up the Hudson River from New York City. To say that I was having complex feelings would be an understatement. Entering this iconic penal institution would be the first time I'd been in a prison since I'd left the Federal Correctional Institution in Lexington, Kentucky in 1978 as prisoner number 00180. 190. Sing Sing is intimidating. 20-foot stone and concrete walls with gun towers every few hundred yards. It stretches over 130 acres. This penitentiary carries the history of American punishment made inside its walls. It has been the scene of some of the worst abuses. 614 men and women were executed there until the abolition of the death penalty in 1972. Today would be a considerably more positive event. To its credit, the New York's Department of Corrections has been attempting to make up for the tragic mistakes of the last 50 years, the massacre at Attica being the foremost for me. Their willingness to let a bunch of debauched rock musicians and political agitators into one of their maximum security prisons spoke volumes about their resolve to move corrections into the 21st century. New York has decreased the populations of its prisons and closed many, while simultaneously reducing crime rates. They've created a system of drug courts, nonviolent courts, and mental health courts to cope with the complex challenges many of us face in life. It's not perfect, but today, New York is doing better than many states. I'd lived in denial for decades about my time in prison. Of course, I talked about it some, and even recorded one light-hearted song about it, but I never really looked inside my heart and faced what it meant. Sometimes, with certain people, I bragged about it, but as a rule, my experience was so far beyond most people's purview that talking about it made me feel like an alien. Most of the people I came into contact with had never experienced anything like a prison term. Conversely, when I ran into someone else who had done time, I usually overdid it with an inappropriate level of fervor. I never addressed my shame and fear. I believe I was afraid what happened to me and how it changed me, and I want to believe that I had everything under control. And yet, here I was, going back into a prison, and I was nervous about it. Of course, this was an utterly different circumstance and none of those original fears. But really, why was I doing this? Why go to all the effort needed to round up these rock stars and wrangle them onto a bus at 8 a.m. in the morning after a big New York City gig the night before? I had wanted to do something to confront mass incarceration for a long time. This was going to be my start. My mind was racing as if something buried deep inside me was bubbling up. I was going to either cry, laugh, or puke. It wasn't intellectual, it was emotional. I was both afraid and engaged. It was happening and I had to go through with it. The previous night in the dressing room of the Nokia Theater in Manhattan, Billy Bragg and I were talking about acoustic guitars. I had been doing more solo acoustic gigs and I was struggling to get a decent onstage sound out of my guitars. His guitar was colorfully painted with slogans like "Stay Free," "This Tool Kills Time," and "Jail Guitar Doors." Billy told me he'd founded an independent initiative in England to provide guitars to prisoners for rehabilitation. He'd named it Jail Guitar Doors. I hadn't known anything about this when I invited him to come to New York to perform the show. I just knew he was a brilliant singer-songwriter and that he supported social justice around the world. I hadn't even thought about the song Jail Guitar Doors in decades. Billy explained that he founded Jail Guitar Doors UK to celebrate Joe Strummer's life's work. It was Joe and The Clash who first inspired Billy to pick up the guitar and raise his voice for justice, so he named his initiative after their song. "It's an old Clash B-side. You ever heard of it?" he asked. "Yes, I know the song," I replied. "It's about me." He said, "What do you mean?" I told him the story of The Clash writing it about me when I went to prison back in the 70s. He looked at me with a blank expression on his face. "What's the first verse?" I asked him. He thought for a minute, sputtered, and his face turned red. "Bloody fucking hell, I completely forgot. It is about you." We both cracked up. For the record, there were also verses about Peter Green and Keith Richards who were having trouble with the authorities too. As the night progressed, we continued to talk prison, rehabilitation, politics, and the transformative power of music. But emotions were intensifying in me. We played that night for a few thousand ecstatic rock fans at the annual benefit concert for the NYC charity Road Recovery. We were joined on stage by my old pal Iggy Pop, and he was superb. We rocked the house. It was one of those rare nights in music when everything falls together beautifully. Everyone sounded good, looked good, and it was for a good cause. At the end of the show, Road Recovery's founders, Gene Bowen and Jack Bookbinder, walked out on stage with 3 prison officials and presented me with a set of Sing Sing cell door keys. I was knocked out. The symbolic value was not lost on me. The keys to freedom. All my musician friends surrounded me, everyone smiling big smiles, happy not only for me, but for all of us who pulled together to do the work we did. As Tom Morello put it, the night was well and truly rocked. I've learned the value and meaning of service as a way of life, and it partially defines me. One of the way I grow and heal is by being of service to my fellow man. The Buddhists say, to be selfish and wise, do something for someone else, and you will benefit too. I could say that almost everything good that has happened to me over the last 2 decades has been a direct or indirect result of helping someone else. This is more than just an ancient axiom. It is a design for successful living. The reward is in taking the action itself. This is my route to durable fulfillment, doing for others and accepting the accomplishment with humility and pride in a job well done. This is how I rebuild the self-respect and dignity I lost on my trip to the gutter. So now, here we are at Sing Sing to meet and perform for a group of long-term violent felony offenders who made a commitment to positive change. On the bus with me were my friends, Don Was, Tom Morello, Boots Riley, Etty Lau Farrell, Perry Farrell, Daniela and Gilby Clark, Jerry Cantrell, Matt Pinfield, Handsome Dick Manitoba, Dave Gibbs, Carl Restivo, Eric Gartner, and of course, Billy Bragg. It was a big day for everyone. Technicians, artist managers, prison staff, prisoners, and the musicians. We all took a giant leap of faith. Most of my colleagues were grim-faced through the sign-in and the security briefing process. There was no joking or cutting up, which is unnatural for any bunch of musicians. The concert was held in the inmate dining hall. Our crew had set up the gear on the floor, and we did a quick line check before the inmates were escorted in. I'd given some thought about my speech to the men. I knew I had to be rigorously honest. I wanted them to know that I identified with them, and that it was possible to successfully return to the free world. Afterward, the men asked questions, and we had a few good laughs over some of my missteps. Tom, Handsome Dick, and others in our group shared their own challenges. We had a good conversation together. Billy opened up the musical concert with a very powerful solo acoustic performance. He sang his own I Keep Faith, as well as the Bob Marley gem Redemption song. When he got to the final chorus, the men spontaneously sang along, and I was moved to tears. Between songs, Billy talked about the power of the guitar as a tool for self-expression. He said that the donated jail guitar doors guitars were not gifts, but a challenge to the men to use them as tools to express themselves in a new and non-confrontational way. These ideas rang true for me. He was talking about the inmates, but he was talking about me too. After Billy finished, the rest of us strapped on our electric guitars, plugged in, and rocked Sing Sing. Each performer squeezed the most out of their songs, and the fellows responded with cheering and whooping and hollering. We finished with a rousing version of Kick Out the Jams. In the end, they gave us a standing ovation. The prison officials, particularly Deputy Warden Leslie Malin, felt things were going so well that she approved an after-show meet and greet. We all sat at tables, talked with the guys, and signed shirts and set lists. On the bus back to Manhattan, Margaret, Billy, and I continued to talk about jail guitar doors. At one point, I told Billy, "What you're doing in England is great, but I'm an American. I've done time, and I'm a musician. Maybe I could take this on in this country. Maybe I can be a bridge between the musicians on the outside and the musicians on the inside." "Right," he said, "because I was just about to ask you with it. You're the only one who can do it because you've been inside and you know how the system works." This was the moment to tie together some of the big-ticket themes of my life: love, music, prison, service, social justice, and political activism into one neat package. So right then and there, on that bus, Jail Guitar Doors USA was born. Over the past 3 decades, I had watched with dread and anger as prison populations skyrocketed. More people, just like me, were going to prison for longer sentences under worse conditions. Now, I could do something to mitigate the damage. Between 1975 and today, people would be sentenced to terms of up to 25 years for the exact same offense I pled guilty to. In some cases, life without the possibility of parole sentences have been imposed. These punishments hardly fit the crime. Back at the hotel that night, nearly every musician pulled me aside to tell me their feelings about what they'd experienced. To a man, each was deeply struck by the fact that the inmates they'd spent the day with seemed to be regular guys, and that it could have been any of them doing time inside. But instead, they were protected by celebrity, wealth, luck, or any number of resources the prisoners didn't have. Handsome Dick was especially unsettled by the fact that he was returning to his abundant life in Manhattan, while those men returned to their cell block cages. There you have it.
Tom, thanks, man. Thanks for reading that segment. I just finished that book a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah.
and that segment, service, love, social justice, political activism, that line seems so applicable to what you do every day. I mean, can we talk a little bit about those themes as they apply to what you're going to do tonight over in Brooklyn?
Well, I mean, to bring it right up to the present, tonight I'm playing at the Barclays Center for a title show, which is to support criminal justice reform and address racial inequity in the justice system. That's a benefit show for a myriad of organizations that support that cause. Also, I have on my new record, The Atlas Underground, we've partnered with an great organization called Color of Change, which tackles issues like police brutality, the murder of African Americans by authorities, and inequities in the justice system as well. It's always been in my thought that these are really ingrained. These issues are really ingrained in the DNA of America, but that these problems are not ordained by God. They are human-made, and so they can be undone by humans as well. And so Wayne is a very inspirational person to me, and his from his life story to his daily wisdom that he's imparted, and the idea of doing service but standing strong and firm in your convictions while playing rock and roll is one that certainly is something to aspire to.
And can we talk, when you were just reading that, I didn't realize the Carl Restivo crossover. I mean, I've been listening to your album for the last couple of days, and that Vigilante Nocturne,
right. So Carl is the event in Sing Sing Prison was actually part of a larger justice tour that I organized around a number of states, and Wayne and Billy organized the Sing Sing one. So my bandmates, one of whom is Carl Restivo, for my solo endeavors, were a big part of that tour, and Carl worked with me on this latest Atlas Underground record where, we're trying to tie together social justice. Well, on this record, what we're doing is we're telling social justice ghost stories, and the idea that the voiceless fallen martyrs of the past can inform the struggles of the present to hopefully light some bonfire to illuminate a future that's more just and humane. So, and Wayne and I have been lockstep on that. And so, on this, one of the things that was great about the Justice Tour and the Sing Sing Prison Show was the diversity of the artists involved on it, from Billy Bragg's acoustic to, I believe we actually played the song, Thin Lizzy's song, Jailbreak, with Jerry Cantrell singing the appropriately Thin Lizzy vocals, to my guitar shredding. And on this record as well, we tried to combine the idea of these social justice themes with a myriad of musicians, from EDM to, hard rock music to folk troubadours, from Mumford & Sons to Wu-Tang Clan.
Yeah, man, the width of the artists that you pulled into this is amazing. RZA, GZA, Marcus Mumford. I mean, the Carl Restivo track, I think that was my favorite on the album. It hits in the same spots that a lot of the Rage songs hit.
One of the commonalities that this record has with Wayne's story is that it was these justice tours that began the collaborative experience and getting outside of my comfort zone, playing with musicians of different genres, that really has come to fruition on this record. It's like there's a guiding North Star of this principle that we're going to tell these stories and have a underlying political theme, but we're going to bring it, cast the nets wide, and from Gary Clark Jr. to Bass Nectar, Knife Party, Pretty Lights on the EDM side to Killer Mike, Big Boy, RZA, GZA, Vic Mensa, K-Flay, and a bunch of others to take this in divisive times like these to make an album of artists of diverse ethnicities, ages, genders, and genres. Felt like it was a statement in itself.
Well, it is the Gary Clark Jr. track in particular is the way you said it, stepping out of your comfort zone is apparent, because it's when I was listening to it. I mean, I was not looking at Spotify while it was going past. I was doing something else, and that track, I thought, and there's no chance that I thought that was the one that Gary Clark Jr. was on, because it doesn't sound so much like you. It doesn't sound so much like him. It sounds like something that you guys is a brand new original.
That was the idea. I mean, the goal of this record was a lofty one, and it was to forge a brand new genre of rock and roll, and one that has like the Marshall stack power of my playing, but melded with huge EDM drops and an electronic wizardry of 2018, sort of a musical and sonic alloy of these disparate elements that make something that is hopefully makes up for a powerful, both thematically and musically, something for both the mosh pit and the dance floor.
Nice. I don't know if you recall, how did the tour go? Because it was not a traditional series of shows, the Atlas Underground. I realize it is wrapped by now, but it sounded like a ton of fun. I don't know if you remember saying this or not, but you said it's more of an art installation than a show, non-traditional venues. It's a last big event before we all go to jail.
That's the tour for that. That's the pull quote for the 2019 tour. This was the promotional tour was actually very an interesting format. Like I would talk, it was an hour of conversation where with a local host or notable in each city, and we'd talk about, from my high school band where I wore outrageous punk rock outfits, through Rage and Audioslave, Night Watchman, Prophets of Rage, and then Street Sweeper, and then it was a listening party for the record. And then at the end of the night, I would shred my ass off and give the people what they wanted. So it was really fun for me to interact with an audience a different way, and I think a good way for fans to have an insight in both the music and the man.
Yeah. Do you recall we did a session at Newport Folk when you were there as Night Watchman, and did a session in a cave there. You did Save the Hammer for the Man.
Remember that? Yeah,
that was us. That was me and Bob. And
that's crazy.
You had like 60 people in there for a space meant for like 4, jumping up and down, and we cut the lights when that happened.
That's right.
Jumped up and down on the light.
That's funny. Well, nice to see you again.
Yeah, man. Good to see you.
I totally remember that. Like Newport Folk Festival is one of my favorite festivals to play. The history and the fact that it sort of feels like you're engaged with that history each time that you perform there, and that particular, a cave doesn't even really begin to describe. I don't even know what it was. It was like it's an old
armory. I think
fortress.
They used to,
it's like an old fortress, and it's this tiny room, and I just jammed them all in there, and it's sort of a punk rock Woody Guthrie jamboree.
Well, man, thank you very much for coming through and reading this segment. Have a great show in Brooklyn tonight.
Appreciate it.
And next time are the dates announced for the 2019?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
Well,
right now, just go to tommorello.com. The record's out, Atlas Underground, and check it out.
Well, hopefully there are New York dates. We'd love to cross paths with you, whether it's here in this room or whether it's out in the wild.
Okay. Anytime. Thank you for your thoughtful questioning, and thank Wayne for his great book. Check it out.